Our opening words this morning come from Barbara Brown Taylor. On Sunday mornings, a great division happens among American people, as some go to church and most stay home. Those who stay home aren't taking a week off. Church is just not part of their routine. As far as they're concerned, houses of worship are little more than pretty antiques, fussed over by wishful thinkers who do not know when to admit they're wrong and go home. It's one of the most peculiar things 21st century human beings can do, to come together week after week with no intention of being useful or productive, but only facing an ornate wall to declare things they cannot prove about a God they cannot see. Our word for it is worship, and it's hard to justify in this day and age, but those of us who do it over and over again begin to count on it. This is how we learn where we fit. This is how we locate ourselves between the past and the future, between our hopes and our fears, between the earth and the stars. This is how we learn who we are and what we're supposed to be doing. By coming together to sing and to pray, to be silent and to be still, by peering into the darkness together and telling each other what we see when we do. We may baffle our unbelieving friends and neighbors, but it cannot be helped. Half the time we baffle ourselves, proclaiming good news when the news is so bad, trusting the light when the sky is so dark, continuing to wait on the divine in our midst when all the evidence suggests that it packed up and left a long, long time ago. This morning, we celebrate the fact that this faith continues in pockets of our nation and our world whenever we gather for this baffling, life-sustaining act of worship. And we especially celebrate the need we have of the others who are joining in our Unitarian Universalist churches, often spread desperately far apart, to be part of this faith tradition. Association Sunday is the day that we remember that not only do we come together as individuals into a church community, we also gather our congregations together in a larger community of faith, which makes it possible for us to find our way together into deeper living, richer ministry, and greater witness to the saving power of our faith without a creed. This morning we're delighted to have a guest preacher in our pulpit, a guest who is familiar to this congregation as one of our members, the Reverend Sue Phillips, who also serves as the district executive for the Massachusetts Bay and Clara Barton districts of the Unitarian Universalist Association. So we welcome Sue, and we are glad to be together.
Good morning. Our reading this morning is an excerpt from a reflection by the Reverend Lillian Daniel, Senior Minister of the First Congregational Church in Glen Ellen, Illinois. On airplanes, I dread the conversation with the person who finds out I am a minister and wants to use the flight time to explain to me that he is spiritual but not religious. Such a person will always share this as if it is some kind of daring insight, unique to him, bold in its rebellion against the religious status quo. Being privately spiritual but not religious just doesn't interest me. There is nothing challenging about having deep thoughts all by oneself. What is interesting is doing this work in community, where other people might call you on stuff, or heaven forbid, disagree with you. Where life with God gets rich and provocative is when you dig deeply into a tradition that you did not invent all for yourself.
If I never hear this claim again, it will be too soon. I think you've heard it too by your chuckles, is that right? Yeah. And yet it's everywhere these days, especially in liberal circles, sitting next to us at community meetings, selling self-help books, hanging out on college campuses. Even Oprah says she's spiritual but not religious, people. It's a big problem. Spirituality without religion has become the unholy holiness of the new age, which is probably why Lillian Daniels' piece, part of which we heard in our reading this morning, has sort of exploded on the liberal religious scene. She has dared to be a cranky religious person in public, and you gotta love her for that alone, don't you? I actually left out the really snarky part, which you should check out online. Too snarky for church, but not for a Monday morning. Lillian has dared to say that going to church is actually helpful. And she has had the audacity to imply that creating a spirituality for our personal consumption and out of our own experience alone is hubris. This is radical stuff in a spiritual but not religious world, isn't it? It's radical because our culture in general, and I think liberal culture in particular, tends to prioritize personal liberty and self-reliance over community. Religious people like us, dare I say, are outliers these days because we believe that living in community, the kind of community known as a congregation, not only has value, but it is vital to our spiritual well-being. Somehow we have learned that while it's fine to be spiritual by ourselves, we need each other to be religious. And being religious, I think, is especially unusual these days because it means we've cast our lot with, and gasp, hold on here, people, an actual institution, and that our affiliation with that institution might make an actual claim on our personal identity. That really is countercultural in the 21st century. Don't you feel that a little bit? To claim oneself Unitarian Universalist feels like a daring act, not the commonplace identifier of the 1950s. So you probably know that the root of the word religion is the Latin religare, which means to bind. And I think we sense that, don't we? That by coming here, we choose to bind ourselves with a certain group of people, collectively called the First Parish in Milton, and to a certain tradition called Unitarian Universalism. And Association Sunday asks us to think about who we're bound to exactly, and how, and why. So I'm guessing that many of you have heard of the Unitarian Universalist Association, or the UUA, right? I hope. You've probably seen the logo that's on the front of your order of worship. It's very easy to think of our association as that denominational institution at 25 Beacon Street, the address of the UUA headquarters in Boston. And of course, the UUA is partly the institution and its staff, but really it isn't that at all. Our association is the 1,100 congregations across the country who bound themselves in covenant to do together what we cannot do alone. Our association is both the collection of those 1,100 covenanted congregations and the institutional architecture that connects us. And just in case, when I use a word like architecture, it sounds super abstract, like it's something that only exists out there. I just want you to consider for a moment just a few of our associational connections that run through this place right here, right now. Like the small group ministry model that is so exciting to people this year, that was developed by other UU congregations and it's shared through our networks. Reverend Molly just completed her internship and received fellowship, and our association brokered that internship and trained her supervisor and tested her competency, much to her chagrin occasionally, no doubt. So check out that little bookshelf thingy in your pews. The teal and gray hymnals that were created by our association gather our sacred music, and our publishing wing publish the books. Meanwhile, James is going to get an invitation this week to gather with all the other UU membership coordinators in the district to share ideas and best practices. The curriculum that our children are using next door was written and tested and distributed by the association's religious educators. And when our group of our lay leaders went off to visit the Richmond congregation a few months ago and came back all fired up and talking about leaps of faith, our association paid their way. We just sent our former DRE, Robin Barraza, off to do her ministerial internship in Brookline, trusting that our sister congregation will nurture Robin's vocation as we have in our own time also done. Even Paris's sermon last week was inspired by a conversation with other ministers that was convened by the district, right? Our association lives, and it lives here. Meanwhile, First Parish in Milton pays dues to the UUA and to the district, totaling about $75 a member. This congregation takes its stewardship seriously, as we should. But it would be a huge mistake, I think, to reduce this congregation's associational connections to some gross kind of fee-for-service transaction along the lines of you pay your dues to the UUA and district and you get X services in return. The financial contribution is important, but it's only the bluntest way that we reach out to other Unitarian Universalists. We're a teaching congregation, shaping new ministers whose potential was nurtured by another church and who someday will serve yet another. Parisa serves at the highest levels of leadership of the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association. Did you know that? Did you know Parisa's on the executive team of the UUMA? It's one of the proudest posts a minister can hold, and she brings all of the lessons of you, of all of us, with her to share with other leaders. Our own lay leaders attend district events to help them kind of sort out their own spiritual leadership and to grow it and to share what they know with others. And meanwhile, we literally walk with our sister congregations under a single standing on the side of love banner and therefore amplify our faith's social justice witness. Associational connections are everywhere, and so much of what happens here is enriched by those connections. Our programs are better, our leadership is stronger, and our songs are easier to sing because of the association with other congregations, and we, in turn, strengthen others. So my partner, who is also a Unitarian Universalist, lives near Seattle, and when she comes back east, she always wants to come to church. She insists that we come to worship here. And she takes pictures, and she posts pictures of this beautiful building on Facebook, and she croons about the bell and the steeple and the wide grassy yard and the gilt lettering on the walls, and even the working organ in the chapel next door. She literally doesn't believe me when I tell her that if you Google UU Church, 50 little red pins pop up on the map within 25 miles of my house in Jamaica Plain. This degree of proximity and density astonishes her Western UU heart, because where she lives, people fly to attend district events. They do. 500 people came to their district assembly in Portland, many flying thousands of miles. Some have to drive hundreds of miles to visit another congregation, and they do. They actually do. So her jealousy blasts me out of my presumption that there's a white-steepled UU church gracing the prime real estate of every town green in America. Unitarian Universalists in other parts of the country know what we have the luxury to forget, that we need each other. So imagine just for a second how important it is for the Unitarian Universalist Church of Cheyenne, Wyoming, to feel our collective presence when they raise a new rainbow flag on their building every couple of months because the old one gets burned off its brackets. Or how our brothers and sisters in Knoxville, Tennessee felt when a team from the UU Trauma Response Ministry arrived with our association's president and media experts just after the deadly shootings there. Imagine how it felt to UUs in Kampala, Uganda, when they opened a big box of hymnals from our association after their minister told stories of running out because the congregation is growing. Or how the congregations in rural Alaska are served by a single minister who arrives by bush plane, her travel partly subsidized by the district. Individual congregations can't do this alone, but together we can, and that is the power of our association. And all of these connections, I'm here to tell you this morning, give us a healthy dose of religion to enrich our spirituality. So I have a theory that one of the reasons Lillian Daniels' piece has captured so much attention is that it resists the claim that congregations are fundamentally out of step with the 21st century. Not only what happens in congregations is out of step, but congregations themselves. So I just heard a new phrase that I toy with the way one tongues a sore tooth. Congregations are a 19th century technology. Congregations are a 19th century technology. Wow, I just can turn this over and over again in my head. Now, if I believed that, I literally would not be standing here, rest assured. But the phrase kind of hints at that anachronism of congregational life in a post-parish, spiritual but not religious kind of world. It's impossible not to feel a little old-fashioned arriving at church on a Sunday morning and parking right next to a carriage house, for God's sakes. Our church was literally built for another age. And still, undeniably, this place is a refuge for our longing hearts. Coming here slakes the loneliness and isolation we so often feel in the face of this hurting world, and there is nothing anachronistic about that longing. There is something deeply troubling about the postmodern assumption that we have stopped needing each other to make meaning of the world. How much greater would our loneliness and isolation be if First Parish in Milton were the only one of its kind? This morning we pause to remember that we need the people outside these walls too. Every time a chalice is lit in some other church, our collective place in the order of things is that much clearer and that much brighter. So even now, right now, about 11 o'clock, chalices are burning in Burlington, Vermont, and Rochester, New York, and Kent, Ohio, and Philadelphia, and Annapolis, and Richmond, and Lexington, Charlotte, Charleston, Miami, Birmingham. Our isolation as religious people in a spiritual age is lightened when our understanding of who we are enlarges to include all those hearts too. I want to testify about enlarging hearts. Now, the first Sunday I came here 2 years ago, I didn't know anybody, and I don't know that Parisa and I had ever met before. And I was as tentative as any newcomer would be. So I had visited Parisa in her office, but I had never seen the sanctuary before or an order of service. So one of my first impressions was how gorgeous this space is, but only having just arrived, I admired it with that kind of dispassionate art appreciation kind of eye. The temple of God is holy, which temple ye are, had not really sunk into my bones the way it has now. So that first day, I sat in what has become my regular pew, number 15. I see that there are beautiful interlopers. I'm coming back, people. I sat in number 15. Lovely service, sweet music, excellent preaching, prayerful praying. And then the offering came and went, and I threw some money in the plate. And then I heard the doxology start. So before I became a minister, I was an active layperson in a congregation a lot like this one, and Old Hundredth was always my favorite part of the service. Something about the ritual of the same song every week added a dimension of sound and substance to the singing that reached deep and took root in me, and in fact fueled a vocation. So when I became a minister of a congregation and lost the ability to go to worship, I would sometimes retreat into the dark sanctuary and conjure my home congregation. I would hear them singing Old Hundredth like a lullaby, and I would feel soothed and comforted. So that first day when I came here, I was a stranger to everyone, and as soon as I heard those first few notes, a flood of answered longing stung my eyes and stole my breath, as it does right now, and I knew I was bound to you. This power to alchemize belonging with a few bars of music is the power of our religion. Our association gave us the hymnal in which those words are written, the theology that accepted those new words to the old 16th century music, the freedom for that song to become a chosen tradition in this congregation, and the training for Emma Jean to appreciate its place in the canon of our sacred music. This one little piece of music is only a single sparkle of dew in a great web that connects all Unitarian Universalists, that reaches not only across distance, but across time. And yet that single sparkle of those 4 lines contain everything I will ever need to know about why our association is important. I belong to you, and you people belong to me, not only because of this congregation, but because of another, and because of a religious movement that gives all of us the tools we need to build a sense of ourselves as Unitarian Universalists and the architecture to live this connection in real time and real space, like this time and this space. I thank God for you, for this place, and for our larger faith, which has given me all of you for brothers and sisters. Amen. So, will you please stand? I know it doesn't say so in the order of service, but that's the power of the pulpit. Will you please stand and sing in whatever glorious fashion you're able, hymn number 116, I'm on my way. Prayed in song, let us pray in words and then in silence. God of our hearts, Spirit of life, meet us on the way as we struggle to faithfully make our way through the thickets of life, of faith, of meaning. Meet us in the midst of our questions. Hold our swirling thoughts and anxious hearts in wider peace that tells us all will be well and means it. Meet us as we celebrate the joy of each new connection. Nurture our love of others. Let its power crack our hearts open to new possibilities. Meet us as we know one another's sorrows. Tether us as we go to new depths together, that we might find our way back to healing by offering each other our light. Join us in every twist and turn of the journey to the source of all love, the thread that connects each of our hearts, binds us together, and can make us whole. Be with us as we walk this road of faith in separate bodies in separate congregations all across this globe. Be especially with those who nurture and sustain that larger faith in our midst, including those present here in this sanctuary who labor throughout the week to make us whole. In our collective heart, we hold the sorrows and celebrations of this day. With Tracy, we share prayers
and peace for her friend Jan. With Emma Jean, we give thanks for the life of two dear friends, June Gardner and Elsa Chambers. And with Dale, we hold prayers for his aunt, recently diagnosed with cancer. In silence, we listen for the beating of the heart that knows us each more deeply than we know ourselves, that beckons us forward on the way, that speaks a language too deep for words.
go forth into this spiritual but not religious world a little stronger in your religion. The next time you park by the carriage house, may you appreciate its legacy in our tradition and feel solid moving into the future together. May some portion of the loneliness and longing that you brought with you to church today be met with the presence of hundreds of thousands of our siblings in faith across the country. And may the lit chalices and sung doxologies in 1,100 congregations nationwide feed you in the week to come. Go in peace.